What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the 5 worst owners in the NBA. A lot of teams are pretty dysfunctional and poorly managed, and a huge chunk of the blame goes onto the owners of the team. I'm going to mainly focus on owners who've made horrible draft decisions, poorly managed players, and have held back the progress of their organization. So without further ado, starting off the list at number 5, we have Michael Jordan from the Charlotte Hornets. His airness, the GOAT. We all would have thought Michael Jordan of all players would have been an amazing owner, but that didn't end up happening. Michael Jordan got a minority stake in the Hornets back in 2007 when they were the Charlotte Bobcats, and since then the Hornets have won 464 games in the regular season, and they've lost 651 games in the regular season. Now, that's pretty bad, and Michael Jordan hasn't really made any big moves to really change any of that and make them a winning organization. At the time, Jordan's signing was seen as a positive move because obviously he's one of the greatest basketball players of all time, but things didn't really turn out the way everyone expected them to. Michael Jordan's draft decisions have been highly questionable ever since he got the keys to the organization. Michael Jordan became majority owner in 2010, and his first move as the majority owner, he ended up trading the Hornets' only all-star Gerald Wallace to the Blazers for pretty much a group of nobodies and some draft picks that they ended up wasting. Now, a lot of Hornets fans were pretty confused about this move, and I think at the time it was considered a move that set them back. Whether or not it really did, we don't really know, but it was already starting to show that Jordan's moves would be highly questionable at the time. As for draft picks, his first draft there, he ended up getting Kemba Walker and Bismack Biyombo in the 2011 draft. Now, these are pretty safe picks. I don't really have any problems with any of these. But obviously there were better players on the board like Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, Isaiah Thomas. But these were safe picks, and I don't really think it's too big of an issue. The Hornets did, however, end up having the worst winning percentage in NBA history in a season. The following season, immediately after this draft, they went 7-59 in 2012, and they completely whiffed in the draft because the NBA owned the Pelicans, who were the Hornets, but that's complicated. The NBA basically gave the Pelicans, or the Hornets at the time, the number 1 pick, and they got Anthony Davis, while the Bobcats, or the Hornets now, ended up getting Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Obviously, big pill to swallow for the Hornets, but I mean, they could have drafted better. Bradley Beal was available, Damian Lillard was available, Andre Drummond, like the list goes on. But it sucks that they lost the number 1 pick because Anthony Davis would have probably changed everything for that organization. He and Kemba Walker would have been a really great duo, but it didn't happen. Since Michael Jordan became majority owner, the Hornets have gone through 5 different head coaches, and Jordan never really made any big adjustments to the roster that would have changed anything and made this team a winning organization. He seems to be really bad at scouting talent and has a tendency to continually expect wins out of the team without making major changes to the roster that would put the organization in a better direction to win games. This inability to draft talent led to the infamous 2016 offseason where Jordan overpaid the life out of role players like Nick Batum and Bismack Biyombo. I mean, Biyombo played well for 2 playoff games and got himself a huge contract out of it. I mean, give him credit, but that was a terrible decision by Michael Jordan and the Hornets. Then there was the lowballing of Kemba Walker last season, which was kind of a bad look since Kemba did so much for this organization. And in the long run, I mean, it would have helped the Hornets because they wouldn't have strapped down so much money to one player. But I mean, he was eligible for the Supermax. They didn't even offer him that. They didn't offer him the regular max. They offered him less than the regular max. And I mean, if I'm Kemba, that's disrespectful, especially how much I've done for your organization. So I was kind of surprised Michael Jordan did something like that, but I mean, I guess he's trying to save money. Most owners are. So they ended up going to Terry Rozier, which was an overpay for Rozier, especially since for most of his career, he's just been an inefficient role player who's never shot above 40% from the field in a season until I think this past season. And he's not proven that he can be successful as a first option, which I guess now Devontae Graham became the first option. So not really sure what that move was for, but obviously they needed a point guard when Kemba left, so that's what happened there. Overall, I'd say Michael Jordan is far from the worst owner in the NBA, but I expect more from arguably the greatest player in NBA history as an owner. The Hornets have had very little team success, but Mike seems to be content with mediocrity and developing and not developing a winning culture for the Hornets. I put Jordan at 5 mainly because he's been part of ownership for over 10 years, and the team has basically achieved nothing at all in that time span. And it's hard to say that even now that they have a bright future, because while they do have good young players, I just can't see them putting anything together right now. They need a true superstar draft pick who's going to change their whole organization. And I don't know if they're going to be the lucky team to get the number 1 pick in the next few years. So for that reason, I got Michael Jordan and the Hornets at number 5 on this list. At number 4, we have the owner of the Houston Rockets, Tillman Fertitta. Fertitta bought the Rockets back in 2017 for $2.2 billion, but despite the big purchase, he's been well known for being really cheap. Fertitta's main issues as an owner come less from a basketball perspective and more so from the perspective of his other ventures. Recently, Fertitta has been actively looking for ways to duck paying the luxury tax for the Rockets by not offering larger contracts to guys like Trevor Ariza. There was also the Capella trade, which, although this wasn't the sole reason, offloading his contract to lower their luxury tax was a big reason why he was moved. I think the biggest problem with Fertitta might just be his handling of his other businesses, as well as his political stance on certain things. I'll just get this out of the way. I have no intent of making this video political, so everything I say is going to be objective. Let's start with the Morey situation. After Daryl Morey tweeted in support of human rights for the people of Hong Kong, Fertitta basically pressured Morey into taking down the tweet since he believed it didn't align with the practices of the Rockets organization. I think we all know he said this because it could mean huge financial losses for the Rockets since they have such a strong tie to China through Yao Ming. And of course, this ended up happening because now the Rockets are censored in China and Yao Ming cut ties with the Rockets completely for Chinese basketball, so it ended up happening anyways. There was a point where Morey's job security was pretty much up in the air because a lot of people thought Fertitta was going to fire him, but he didn't do it because obviously that would have been a bad look. If your general manager says something about human rights and you fire him because of that, everyone's going to judge you for that, so Fertitta just kind of swept it under the rug and kept it moving. Fertitta also seems to have a relationship with Donald Trump, and he publicly spoke about Morey's actions to President Trump. It's pretty apparent where Tillman's loyalties lie, and I think it's obvious that money is his number 1 priority before anything else. Fertitta has also publicly been one to criticize the seriousness and legitimacy of COVID-19 to the point where he laid off staff from his restaurant businesses and tried to reduce employee benefits to deal with COVID-19. While the Rockets have been a contending team for the last 6 years, I think Fertitta has no problem blowing up the team in the future if it helps him save money. Overall, he seems like a stingy Mr. Krabs type owner that has very little concern for the people that work for him. So for all these reasons, I have Tillman Fertitta as the 4th worst owner in the NBA. Coming in at number 3, we got the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Glenn Taylor. Glenn Taylor bought the Timberwolves in 1994, and since then the team has been quite up and down success-wise, but mainly on the downside of things. The Timberwolves had moderate success while Kevin Garnett was there, but they pretty much wasted their early years with Garnett, and they failed to put the right talent around him. They had Ray Allen and chose to trade him for Stephon Marbury, who ended up having a dislike for the organization and their supposed preference for Kevin Garnett. Taylor and his front offices were also involved in some illegal salary practices in the late 90s, where they paid former number 1 pick Joe Smith money under the counter to get his bird rights, where they could then give him a larger contract later. This practice is illegal in the NBA, and the Timberwolves had to pay the price for it by losing 5 straight first-round picks, and Taylor was suspended for an entire year in the NBA. That meant he couldn't do any business operations with his basketball team that he owned, which is pretty big of a deal, especially when you're the owner of an NBA team and you have a lot of business stuff to work out. Taylor and company ended up shopping Kevin Garnett in 2007, even though he never made any indication that he wanted to be traded. So then that's when they shipped him off to Boston, and then that big 3 happened in Boston. But Garnett actually wasn't really actively looking to be traded at the time, but I guess maybe some bridges got burnt and they thought it was the perfect time to get rid of Garnett. After the Garnett era, they pretty much did nothing. They've gone through 9 head coaches since Kevin Garnett got traded to Boston, and their only real claims to fame are, they did hit on Kevin Love, Karl Anthony Towns, and if you want to say Andrew Wiggins, I don't know. That wasn't a bad pick, but obviously there were better players in the draft. But anyways, they did pretty good and pretty bad in a lot of these draft picks. So up and down for them draft-wise. Taylor hired a terrible general manager by the name of David Kahn, who set the organization back a ton. They screwed up plenty of draft selections, like taking Johnny Flynn and Ricky Rubio over Stephen Curry, and then they drafted Derek Williams second in the 2011 draft, when you had guys like Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, Isaiah Thomas, even Tobias Harris, Jonas Valanciunas, Nikola Vucevic. Like, all these guys were way better than pretty much everyone in that draft's better than Derek Williams. So yeah. Kahn set the Timberwolves back a ton, and Taylor didn't make any changes until the team took so much damage that everything was already done and the team was in the dumpster. Taylor has been known for mismanaging contracts and overpaying certain guys and underpaying others. Wiggins was overpaid considerably by a choice of Taylor, while Jimmy Butler wanted out as soon as the Timberwolves lost in the playoffs that year, and then he got traded shortly after the following season started. Then there's the whole saga with Kevin Garnett. I won't go too crazy into detail since that could be a whole video in itself, but basically, after longtime Timberwolves head coach Flip Saunders passed away, promises and commitments that Taylor made weren't kept with Kevin Garnett and the Timberwolves organization, and the relationship became really bad after that. Kevin Garnett never felt like Taylor wanted to retire his number there, and his only inclination of doing so was from pressure by the fans, and not because he actually wanted to. The story goes back and forth up until recently, where Taylor publicly announced that he wants to sell the team. Whether or not Garnett and company buy the team is a whole nother story, but for all the things listed above, I'm putting Glenn Taylor as the third worst owner in the NBA. At number 2, we have the owner of the Phoenix Suns, Robert Sarver. Sarver bought the Suns back in 2004 for $401 million, and ever since then, things have been pretty up and down for the Suns. Initially, the Suns were great when he bought the team, since their general manager, Brian Colangelo, did a good job of making the right moves to be a winning team. Since Sarver bought the team, the Suns have a record of 637 regular season wins and 649 regular season losses. Obviously, that's not great, but I mean, there's other teams that have done a lot worse in that time span, but yeah, not the best for the Suns since Sarver became owner. After Colangelo resigned, Sarver had no sense of direction for the team. The Suns went from perennial contenders to bottom feeders every single year, with very little hope of reaching the heights that they achieved with Steve Nash. The Suns had 9 head coaches since 2005, and they haven't been in the playoffs since 2010. The Suns have hardly hit on any draft picks in the last 10 years. It's pretty much just been Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and I guess TJ Warren, even though they traded Warren for basically nothing. They haven't been able to hold down a good general manager for a long time. They haven't been able to develop a winning culture either. While Booker and Ayton are stars, the Suns still need a solid supporting cast around them. I think they're doing a little bit better now when they have like Mikal Bridges, they have Ricky Rubio. They got a good coach now. I think they're doing better right now as of like today, but like in the last 5-6 years, they haven't really done a good job of putting any stars or any good players around their stars for the most part, and it's shown obviously in their wins and losses. Despite all the bad draft decisions made by the Suns, likely the worst of Sarver's actions has to be the renovations to Talking Stick Resort. The city of Phoenix proposed $230 million to renovate the arena, but Sarver demanded that the money come from taxpayers instead of out of his own pocket, even though he's a billionaire. The fact that he wanted money from taxpayers to pay for renovations as a billionaire raised a lot of eyebrows about how he operates as an owner. He's been called out many times for being a bad owner by players and others in the city of Phoenix. Sarver threatened to move the team if he didn't get majority of the money from the city, so the city ended up giving him around $150 million, and then Sarver and his company paid for the rest, which pretty much they ended up paying 2/3. The city themselves paid 2/3 through taxpayer money, while Sarver only paid 1/3 basically. Most Suns fans are begging for the team to be sold so they can get back to winning. I put Sarver as second on the worst owner list mainly because the Suns have hardly done anything the past 10 years, and their future right now looks really unclear. They have a little bright spot in Booker and Ayton, but outside of those two, it's a little murky. I will say they're doing better like right now. They're obviously on a 7-game win streak as of the recording of this video, but I don't know what's going to happen in the future. None of us do, but as of right now, the Suns are doing a little bit better. This may very well be a playoff team this year if everything goes properly, but with the West getting stronger each year, it's going to be really tough for the Suns to turn things around and develop a true winning culture. So for all these reasons, I'm putting Robert Sarver, owner of the Phoenix Suns, as the second worst owner in the NBA. At number 1, I think this one was pretty obvious. We got James Dolan, owner of the New York Knicks. I think it's pretty much the consensus that Dolan is absolutely the worst owner in the NBA, and probably there's consideration that he might be the worst owner in all professional sports. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible since there's a bunch of things Dolan's done over his whole time as an owner, but I'm going to kind of condense it down to the last 10 years or so. Now, the Knicks haven't made the playoffs since 2013, and they've won fewer playoff games in the last 20 years than the Seattle Supersonics, who don't even exist anymore. So right away, we already know the Knicks have some problems, and Dolan doesn't seem the type to really want to fix any of these. Free agents don't want to go to the Knicks like they used to. Going to New York used to be a great opportunity for stars to promote their brands and play at MSG. Now it's hardly considered during free agency for the true megastars in the NBA. Dolan has also screwed up a bunch by overpaying players into big and long contracts that financially held back the team from making real moves. There was the Allen Houston deal, where Houston was paid $100 million for 5 years, where he didn't even play the following season in 2001. And then there was also the Amari Stoudemire deal, where he was paid $100 million for 5 years when his knees were absolutely screwed. There's other contracts he gave that messed up the development of the team, but these two are probably some of the worst that he's ever given out, especially given the circumstances. The Knicks have also not made too many great front office hirings over the last few years, and a lot of that goes onto Dolan and his inability to bring in the right people who can make a lasting impact on his organization. The Knicks have basically whiffed on draft picks in the last 10 years or so. Outside of Porzingis, the Knicks haven't really made any franchise-altering draft selections, mainly because they've never been fortunate enough to get the number 1 pick in any of these drafts. Whether Barrett is franchise-altering remains to be seen, but for now, the draft hasn't been too kind to the Knicks. Then there's the whole Dolan as an individual thing. Dolan doesn't take hate and criticism too well. Every time a fan starts a sell the team chant or something, he gets them out of MSG before his ego gets bruised. A fan got banned over this actually, I think either last season or the season before. A fan got banned because Dolan couldn't take it. There was also the situation with Charles Oakley, where Oakley felt disrespected by the Knicks organization, and Dolan publicly got him removed and banned from the arena in an altercation with the MSG security. Dolan has garnered a pretty rough reputation among most of the professional sports owners as being one of the worst owners in all sports, and majority of fans desperately want the Knicks sold as soon as possible. For all these things, Dolan has to be the absolute worst owner in the entire NBA. The fact that the Knicks don't have a bright future right now is pretty concerning for Knicks fans and proves that Dolan is without a doubt the worst owner in all of basketball. That's going to do it for this one, guys. These are my 5 worst owners in the NBA. Who do you guys think is the worst owner in the NBA? Comment your thoughts down below. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.
It's not worth it, I don't think so. I got too much to lose. If you jump at me